It's a little chilly these days. Let's see, can we bring it in closer? The weather is turning, although no rain today. We are so lucky. This is the 18th week without rain. Try to keep my microphone unencumbered. I have to wrap up. It's a little cold to be sitting out here for an hour, so gloves would be nice too. I should get like little fingerless gloves. Yeah. So, hello. I got all prettied up today and did my hair nice and took some headshots, and so I have to edit those because I joined this acting class and they're asking for my headshot, and for this week I'm trying to memorize a monologue from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I should practice that more. Class is on Tuesday. Time flies. But I wanted to wear this other dress for my headshots, but it was too cold outside, so I had to throw on a sweater and a jacket. It's cold. I mean, well, it's sunny. It was overcast today, a little like gray, but then the sun kind of came out, and it's nice right now, but chilly. Like my hands are cold. Sorry about that. Doing some garden work back there, but hopefully that's far enough away that it's not bothersome. The weather is definitely getting colder, so trying to prepare for that. Summer. I miss you, summer. Wonder if I can take a getaway to somewhere warm over the winter. I'm trying to think, it's fall. I could do with some bright colored leaves you'd see on the East Coast or West Coast, upper West Coast. That'd be nice, but it doesn't seem to do that here. I'm getting chestnuts falling from the tree, so I'm excited about that because I'm going to turn it into flour again and then into cookies because it's real good. Apparently the acorn crop of this year is not so good, but there are the chestnuts, so I'll get some kind of cookies. And I was thinking, for the winter, if I can escape somewhere warm for a little bit. I was also thinking my birthday is in January, and I'd really like to do something like go somewhere, but like above all, I'd like to spend time with friends, and I don't have friends here, but my friends are all spread out everywhere, so it's like I have to choose which friend I'd want to see, I guess several of them are in LA, but well, every time I plan a party there, you have to invite like 3 times as many people as you want to show up. I'm thinking what to do for my birthday in January. I gotta start thinking about that now, in case I want to fly somewhere. I was thinking maybe London or England in general. I mean, I have a couple friends there, but being around a lot of English sounds nice. Anyway, okay, we're gonna get started on chapter 18. Next week's the last week. Paranormal experiences, seen UFOs. Random question. I might have seen some kind of little shadow ghost once, like a long time ago, but there's been nothing like really concrete. I would love to see something paranormal. I had this weird thing about UFOs as a kid. I would like have them in my dreams and stuff. But no, alas, I have not. Perhaps I'm just not that perceptive. That's right. I need to schedule a seance with a friend of mine for this one diary of mine that is haunted. I read out of that before for you guys. It's on the channel. It's Evelyn Quinby. And the last person who had it saw a ghost. I'm trusting them on that one. But I would be suspicious if they had tried to sell it for a lot of money. But they were trying to sell it for cheap. So So we're going to do a seance, I think. So we need to set that up. It was just like a passing in a hallway when no one else was home. And then it like dawned on me that no one else was home. So, yeah, we got to do that seance. I don't know if I don't think it'll be a live stream, but I think I will make a video out of it. So that should come up soon. I need to talk to him about that. But next week is our last week with the nun's story. I'm wondering if there's anything special I can do, but I'm not sure what. I have any ideas? I don't really know how I can close up this whole reading. I'll think of something or make a comment on the video and let me know if you have an idea. So, I like to get the book in the shot, otherwise it just looks like I'm, I don't know, looking down. Yeah, okay. So, microphone is there, and we start reading. All right. Oh, there was something I was going to say and I can't remember. Maybe I'll remember later. Okay, here we go. The years of the German occupation ran together like the print of the clandestine newspapers when you tried to read them in the dim light of the Belgian blackout. Only headlines stood forth. Nazis in Russia, 1941. Commando raid on Dieppe, 1942. Rommel pushed back to Tunisia, 1943. Sister Luke was never sure afterwards in just which one of those years after her father's death and the three words, many papal powers, flashed again in her memory and then slowly, compulsively took form and meaning. Nor could she date her first visit to the confessional to say that she no longer belonged in a convent. She remembered only that the voice behind the grill had replied with so little surprise, you might have thought it an everyday occurrence to have nuns whispering distractedly of defeat and suggesting return to the world. Her defeat had so many facets, she could not define it all at once, but only her scorching shame for being a hypocrite in the religious life, for wearing the garb of obedience while flouting the holy rule, and the cross of Christ above a heart filled with hate. I can never learn to see Christ in a German, Father, not if I stay 100 years in the convent. This is only one of my faults. She sat under the heel of the Nazis, growing hungrier and angrier. With her sister she was praying that the Americans would come soon, but on her own asking God to forgive them for such childish hopes in a world that seemed to have gone mad, and which drove her mad because she couldn't lay hands on an atlas to see where the conquest had spread, which had begun, so to speak, on her own doorstep. Even in her own heart, in that flame of hate, she had been fighting for 3 long years. We will do an herbal thing. With little special herbals stuffed in the end. Okay, let's see. Now I have to refresh my memory because we were going over the videos of her smoking and I was getting advice from my smoker. Trying to remember how she did that. Oh, now the end is all. Okay, let's not drop that on myself. During those years, the student nurses grew thinner, like the nuns, but without the stoicism that enabled the nuns to face the trials, at least with outward calm. Sister Luke discovered with shock that her students were eating remainders of food from the trays of tubercular patients, to whom the best that could be procured was given. The girls swallowed pats of butter as they walked from wards to diet kitchens, and bits of meat left on plates the tubercular patients had coughed over. Don't touch the food on those trays, she begged them. I know you're hungry, but you risk contamination with every mouthful taken from them. I think that was right. I think that's, yeah. Often in the weekly culpa, she was proclaimed for having needlessly prolonged a conversation with a student. She knelt and accepted her penance, marveling meanwhile at the integrity of the sisterhood, which would keep its holy rule alive in the midst of chaos. Every nun knew that hers was the only floor that had not lost a student nursed the perilous roads in search of family. With dogged regularity, she visited her confessor, and month after month the father counseled her to be prudent, to pray for strength, to offer up to God her sufferings under the occupation, and to meditate on St. Peter in chains. I don't recall that story. St. Peter in chains. Oh dear. Her spiritual struggle was the loneliest one of her whole convent life. Her prayers were arid, no grace came, no relief, no inspiration to guide her tormented conscience. The abyss of silence between herself and God did not frighten or dismay her now, as once it might have. She understood it perfectly in terms of her religious formation. God gave the grace to do his commands, of which a major one was to love your enemy. Each time you failed, you took something from him. He would return, give you another chance and other graces to strengthen you. Just so many times, she reminded herself. Then he would ask no more, and no more would the grace be given. I don't think that's how it works. It did not mean that he had ceased to love you, only that your transgressions had made him too sad to speak. Okay, everybody out there, you're not going to make God too sad to stop helping you, okay? It's a long and complicated topic there. The chaplain spoke often with her, in the confessional and in her small office on the tuberculosis floor. But he was a frail and ailing old soul to whom the world outside the convent wall was the apocalypse come true, with 10-horned beasts coming up over the land, and all its rivers and springs turning into blood. Apocalypse is another subject. Okay, yeah. I might discuss that at some point. Not the apocalypse, but religion. It's touchy, but I feel like I want to make a video about that at some point. In the world, he would whisper and shake his grizzled head while nibbling a chocolate bar with which Mother Didyma occasionally presented to him to keep up his strength also. Why don't you try to have a talk with your superior, my child? She'd certainly agree with me that I don't belong in a convent, Sister Luke would think, but she always managed to hold her tongue. Just once she had tried to explain to her superior why, in these days of so much suffering and dying, she was repeatedly late for meals and devotions when the bells caught her in the midst of a spiritual talk with a frightened patient. It always seems like time stolen from souls, ma mère, to break off abruptly and turn away for food or to read an office. Oh, there it is. It was as if she had torn up the holy rule before Mother Didyma's narrowing eyes. She had had to keep her gaze fixed firmly on the crucifix above her superior's chair, to remember that the Christ of the community was speaking to her, and not a thwarted missionary talking scathingly of the spoiling the missions engendered in weak sisters sent out too young. Laxity in obedience, independent judgment, self-esteem masked as spiritual enterprise, she never went back again to try to open up her heart. Her conscience compelled her to report each failure, such as yielding to the temptation to read the clandestine newspapers, giving to her students, instead of returning it to the kitchens, the food from a tray sent up for a patient who had died while the tray was in transit, and continuously, like a repeating record that made each week's culpa sound the same, her failure in charity to the enemy, whom she could not learn to forgive. Each appearance of the Germans inside the hospital fed the hatred for them which she had never, with all her praying and struggling, been able to transmute. After they established a commandantur in the town, they came more often, growing so strict about blackout regulations that Mother Didyma thought it prudent to appoint a blackout nun, whose responsibility was to see that every shade in the hospital was pulled down at sunset. The shades were of black paper, which began to show wear after the first year. The nuns kept them hung together with safety pins and adhesive tape, and the sight of them enraged the Gestapo. But as long as no light penetrated to the outside, Sister Alberta was safe. One night, however, a crack of light showed through. The blackout nun was ordered to report next day to the commandantur. As punishment, she was commanded to appear each morning thereafter for 1 month at 5 o'clock to roll up every blackout shade in the headquarters, which was in a confiscated chateau that had 90 windows and was a good half-hour walk from the convent. Sister Luke raged inwardly when she heard the little nun rising at 4 in the morning to go forth like a janitress to make ready for the day the offices of the Nazi command. The fact that Sister Alberta uttered no complaint but shouldered her humiliating task with a smile of utmost sweetness only increased Sister Luke's fury and showed her again what irreconcilable differences lay between her and her outwardly seeming sisters. Then the Nazi persecution of the Jews began, and she saw fear of the Germans translated into physical form. Hi, Kat. What's up? One of her best student nurses was a Belgian Jewish girl with classical Semitic face that recalled portraits of founding fathers of the diamond banks of Antwerp. Jessie asked a leave of absence on the day the underground paper carried news of the Nazi edict that all Jews wear the Star of David armband, with a companion story of what happened in Antwerp as soon as the edict was published. Practically every Gentile of the city came forth wearing the discriminatory armband, and in several churches there were fine silken armbands embroidered with the Star of David fastened about the wooden arms of the Christ statues. The Germans had to repeal their order. "You're not afraid of them, are you, Jessie?" Sister Luke asked. "Look, we've made them a laughingstock. They can't bear to be laughed at, as we Belgians know how to laugh." She stopped, hearing herself saying we. We in the world, she thought. We who put sugar in their petrol tanks. We who burn cigarette holes in their uniforms and crowded trolleys. We who collect the tassels off their sabres, snipping them skillfully from the rear when traffic halts, bundle us all together on street corners. We who are taken as hostages. A lucky strike. Sorry I never tried other cigarettes. At some point I will. I've just been lazy, and it's easy to grab these from my boyfriend, so. "Yes, sister, I'm afraid," Jessie said. "But if you could possibly give me a month's leave, I wouldn't be any more." Jessie returned at the end of the month, unrecognizable. Plastic surgery had altered her handsome profile. Peroxide had turned her raven black hair into something resembling straw. Would she have to keep dyeing her hair in the convent, though? I mean, she would have to. That'd be bizarre, a nun dyeing her hair. The nuns pretended charitably not to see the desecration of the classic countenance, but Sister Luke cursed the Germans every time she looked at Jessie. Her conscience compelled her to inform her confessor that she was cursing the enemy and living for the day when God's wrath would be loosed upon them. "You must pray, sister. Pray God to deliver you from revenge in the heart," the old father said sadly. In a sense, she was delivered of it not long after. But as far as she could see, it was not a delivery wrought through prayer. A Prussian war nurse was brought to the hospital with a shrapnel hole in her lung. Sister Luke had heard of these Nazi nurses who roamed the front lines and sorted out their own wounded under fire. The French underground press referred to them as the grey mice. Grey because of their grey nursing uniforms, and mice, Sister Luke supposed, as a Gaelic witticism to describe their tiger-like courage. Sister Alberta accompanied the stretcher to the tuberculosis floor, her sweet face clouded with compassionate concern. "She bleeds badly beneath that field dressing, sister," the little nun whispered. "She'll need a transfusion at once. I offer my blood if it matches." Sister Luke looked at her, worn to candle thinness by her recent tour of punishment duty in the Nazi headquarters. Then she looked at the Prussian grey mouse and the stretcher. She turned up the Wehrmacht identification tag that gave name, age, and blood type. If the doctor orders transfusion, it will be my blood, Sister Alberta. The eyelids of the Nazi nurse snapped open. She stared at the two nuns bending over her, her eyes as hard and shiny as the enameled swastika brooch that fastened her high collar. There will be no transfusion, do you hear? She said in harsh, precise French. I would rather die than have Belgian blood in my veins. She closed her eyes as if she could no longer bear the sight of them, and they carried her to a private room, next door to the room where two aged Jews were lying up for the duration as bedridden patients, paying their way with uncut diamonds. Sister Luke watched the German fight for her life for 2 days. The doctor would not risk operating unless she accepted transfusion. He offered to seek matching blood among the German officers in the town. The Nazi nurse informed him haughtily that the German officers gave their blood only for the fatherland and forbade him to try any tricks to get mongrel Belgian blood in her veins. Despite herself, Sister Luke was compelled to admire her enemy's will, forged in a hate that matched her own. The deliberate choice of death in preference to receiving the blood of an enemy made her wonder if she would have had the same courage were she ever to fall wounded into German hands. One cannot gainsay it. They have patriotism, she said in the recreation after some other nun had introduced the subject of the German nurse. I wish I could be in her place, she ventured, be able to show my patriotism by dying as a martyr for my country. Mother Didymer looked up from her mending, first at Sister Luke, then around the circle of sisters as though following the trail of her unmonastic desire. You can be a martyr every day, said the superior, and I'm sure we all are, dying to ourselves each day, not for love of country, but for love of God, without witnesses or iron crosses as rewards. We in our dying, she said firmly, stand alone in the presence of the Master. We have his smile and his gratitude, which are of much more worth, are they not? The Nazi nurse died the next day. Refusing opiates, she was conscious until the end. Her loss of blood made her look embalmed before she was dead. The hard blue eyes were wide open, gazing with scorn at the nuns bending over her when her breathing ceased. That's the first German I've actually seen die, Sister Luke thought as she closed the eyelids. There was a quickened beating of her heart, as though gladness had come into it with her thought. But later, her satisfaction for an enemy's death tormented her conscience. She prayed for forgiveness, but felt no corresponding relief. It was as though she addressed a friend too sad to reply. She talked to the chaplain when he came to the ward next day. My whole life work dedicated to saving lives, Father, and I was glad for that death. I rejoiced inwardly to see an enemy die. And in this habit, Father, she looked down at her hands knotted whitely together on the desk. Life-saving hands with no heart behind them, she thought bitterly. Hands that once I offered up to God as the best part of me, and mine to you, O Lord. We all sin, my child. Not one of us is perfect, said the old father. Don't you hear me saying every morning at the altar, cleanse my heart and lips, O Almighty God? Munda cor meum, he chanted softly. Your heart and your lips. She looked at his delicate face with its colourless lips pinched with hunger and piety, yet curved in a smile and longing for a burning coal to be placed between them instead of the vitamin tablets she would have administered had she been able to steal some from the German nurse. There's a big difference, Father, she said quietly, too big for me to cope with any longer. I'm asking you quite simply to lay my case before the Cardinal. She picked up the list of names she'd prepared of patients who wished to talk with him. We've got open cases in the ward now, Father, she said. Since the private rooms are all full up, I'd put a mask on you, but I don't approve of those reminding masks with TBs. Neither would Christ, sister. The chaplain took the list and stood up. Wait a little more, won't you? He pleaded. Make a novena to our Blessed Virgin. She always works miracles, haven't you noticed? So much smoke. She watched him walk away, his thin, undernourished hair floating like a war-worn halo about his head. "I'll wait a little," she whispered to the frail figure in a flapping soutane. "I'll wait because you asked it. I'll say a novena again, also because you asked me to, but nothing will happen." A fortnight later, she resumed her discussions with the chaplain where she had left off. "Christ will not abandon me if I go out, Father. I have given too many cups of water in his name, and he knows I would go on doing it, whether working for him as a nun or as a war nurse." She besieged him when he came to her desk. She besieged him in the confessional. It was as though she were waging a private war among contestants who frequently changed sides, including herself. "In the world, my child," sighed the father, "it's a risky place to be now." "I agree," she said, "but would it not be a hypocrisy to remain in the convent only through fear of the world? It must be voluntary, through love of God alone, and without any grumbling and inner murmuring, Father. Otherwise it has no merit in his eyes. My staying has no merit. He knows why I remain. Because you, his vicar on earth, are doing your duty, as you are vowed to do, and will not make a move unless I threaten. You care only for my soul, not for the house of mind, heart, and emotions it lives in. It's my responsibility to keep that house in order, and I have failed." Well, she's not saying this out loud, by the way. "A healthy soul needs. I believe, Father," she said, "that even the smallest gesture of charity made in the world with joy would be 10 times more pleasing to God than all the work I do here under a holy rule I only pretend to obey." It was strange to be holding theological discussions with an aged priest while British bombers were roaring overhead towards Germany. She listened to the high hum of the formations and sent prayers winging after them. "Perhaps," said the father, "but how do you know you'd please God more in the world than you do here?" "Because God hates a hypocrite," she replied very firmly. Herbal. "I know," she said to the chaplain on another day, "what a lost sheep looks like, and if I were in the world I would know where to take it when I find it." "I have no doubt of that, sister, but who would be the lost sheep? You or the soul you meet along the way and lead back to God?" Never once, while she thrust and parried, growing ever more tense with the strain, did the impulse to walk out overcome her. It had been done before. God had all sorts of runaways, including runaway nuns. She wanted an official paper in her hand, a formal laicization which could stand as passport, at least for her soul in its passage from a promise into the world. Like all passports, it was hard to get. They went off into the cellars now in the beginning of '44, as the overhead fights augmented in fury in preparation for the D-Day landings. The bravery of the nuns under bombardment was another precious detail of the religious life Sister Luke put under the bell jar of memory. The sisters thought of nothing but the safety of their patients. They toiled down the long stairways with the stretcher cases and encouraged the ambulatory with little nods and smiles. Not one of them would have remained in the cellars during the air raids had Mother Didyma not said, "God helps those who help themselves, everyone to the cellars." Then it was an order, and they stayed below through obedience. Sometimes in the cellars, Sister Luke reread the few letters she had received from her brothers, sharing them with her patients as if they were all one family. Antoine, who had been captured in the fall of Namur, was in Norway, a prisoner in a Nazi concentration camp just under the Arctic Circle. The 2 younger were somewhere inside Belgium, unregistered, doing what they could to harass the occupation forces. Their cards and letters were written in pencil, which meant that every positive in them must be read in the negative. The patient's eyes sparkled when she read the scribbled postcards from the young brothers inside Belgium, extolling the progress of the 1,000-year Reich, which meant that it was going to end soon. Most often, as she sat in the gloomy cave, she pondered material for her next talk with the chaplain, the sole intermediary between herself and the primate in Malines, which had papal power to free a nun from her vows. No reasons she had given him so far seemed to satisfy him. She examined herself as if she were a body laid out upon a table. There were many recent wounds, but none grave or deep enough to account for her spiritual revolt against the holy rule, and her inner refusal to continue trying to live up to it. The surface wounds, moreover, were probably common enough in the religious life in wartime. Deliberate disobediences when patriotism flared, anger for the enemy each time his planes went over, longings to be free and get out and help in the fight, even gladness when you saw an enemy die before your eyes. Surely, the chaplain had heard every one of them time and again, from the sisters sitting with her under the low stone arches, passing their beads through their fingers, while the bombs made everything tremble except the serene smiles on their faces. There had to be something deeper to account for her total despair, something that went down through flesh and bone into the marrow, something that went back beyond the war years. It has to do with conscience, she thought, that old pain so chronic now that it's completely diffused. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack. How do you blow the donuts? Like the circle. I should look that up. I don't know how you do it. Then one day in early May of 1944, Reverend Mother Emanuel came for her annual visit. Mother Didyma put the notice on the bulletin board the night before, and the list of her nuns in the order of their age in the religious life, as they would be received for their private talks. Sister Luke found her name midway on the list. She knew that this time she would not go to the Superior General. In the recreation, she chose a seat next to Sister Frances, who preceded her on the list. Casually, as if it were a matter too trivial to share with the circle, she said in an aside, "By the way, Sister Frances, after your talk with the Reverend Mother tomorrow, would you please tell her that I pass up my turn? I've really got nothing to say, and why take up her time?" Next morning, she watched her nursing sisters slipping off duty one by one, their faces calm and composed. Sister Frances nodded to her when her turn came, signaling that she had not forgotten the message. The work in the ward was heavy, with 3 pulmonary post-operatives to attend besides all the other patients. The inner voice that mocked her, as she moved from bed to bed, seemed to come from somewhere outside. "Coward," it said over and over. After a while, Sister Frances returned and beckoned her aside. "Reverend Mother wants to see you anyhow, Sister Luke," she whispered. "She said to tell you that even if you have nothing to say, she has something she would like to ask you." Sister Frances smiled and took the temperature charts from her hands. They both knew it was an order. Reverend Mother Emanuel gave her the wondrous smile that disarmed completely as she made her reverence and knelt. "Only for that smile was I a coward," Sister Luke told herself tremulously. "Why didn't you come willingly, my child?" the Superior General asked. "Didn't you know that by inspiration I was aware of your struggles? Haven't you been praying and calling out for help?" "Yes, Reverend Mother." Sister Luke looked straight into the dark eyes, from which nothing could be hidden. "But it's too late for discussion. I am at the end of my struggles." "There is no end when one loves the Lord as you do," the Superior General said softly. "You are perhaps discouraged, sister, though this is difficult for me to understand in view of the reports I've had about you. Your sisters love you, the doctors trust you, and your students respect you enormously." She nodded, smiling. "Or perhaps you are in one of those moments of aridity when you pray and nothing happens." She told the sweet familiar story of Christ asleep in Peter's boat when the tempest arose, and of his disciples' fear when he made no reply to their cries until they woke him. And Sister Luke knew her Superior General was giving her time to compose her thoughts, even giving her a few helpful leads. "Sometimes, my child, when we are in the midst of our own tempests, as you undoubtedly are at this moment, Christ may be sleeping. His silence is no cause to lose faith. Did you have patience? Have you struggled long enough to be able to say so surely that you've come to the end?" The Reverend Mother folded her hands over her crucifix and waited for her to reply. I think, Reverend Mother, that I've been struggling for years. Sister Luke hesitated. For years. Then quite suddenly she saw her spiritual crisis clearly as the inevitable result of something that had lain in wait for her for years. She classified that latent menace as if she had found its name in the text she might have been reading. Her voice was now so calm. In the beginning, she said, each struggle seemed different from the preceding. No two ever seemed for the same cause, until they began to repeat, and then I saw they all had the same core. Obedience, Reverend Mother. Obedience without question, obedience without inner murmuring, obedience blind, instantaneous, perfect in its acceptance as Christ practiced it, as I can no longer do. My conscience asks questions, Reverend Mother. When the bell calls to chapel and I have to sacrifice what might be the psychological moment in a spiritual talk with a patient, my conscience asks which has priority, it or the holy rule. In my mind, I have never been able to make this clear. She paused, struck by the thought that once before she had tried to say this to Mother Didyma. She caught her breath sharply. Continue, my child, said the Reverend Mother. I believe that most of my failure stems from this conflict. There are times, Reverend Mother, when my conscience decides I must do something opposite to my superior's wishes. You remember that tropical medicines examination? Sister Luke's voice rose one note above the calm reading tone. How did I know that that suggestion did not come from you? Yet even had I known that it had, I could not have failed. Not even for you, Reverend Mother. My conscience could not have accepted such a hideous waste of time and mental effort, nor could I ever have persuaded myself that God would have wished it. There are scores of other examples I could cite, but you know them all. You receive the reports, and when you read Mother Didyma's, she smiled bleakly, late every day for chapel or refectory or both. That's how far this has gone, you see. I hear the bells, but I can no longer cut short a talk with a patient who seems to need me. When I have night duty, I break the grand silence, because this is the time when nature relaxes, gives a little peace, and sometimes makes men in trouble want to talk about their souls. And that is the time when reason begins to query the rule most unanswerably. Why must God's helpers be struck dumb by 5 bells in the very hours when spirits expand and seek to communicate? She stopped abruptly on the word communicate. Sick with grief, she stared at what she had communicated. A shadow of sorrow lay over the Gothic face bent toward her. After a long silence, Reverend Mother Emmanuel cleared her throat. Are you going out, my child? She said. I think so, Reverend Mother. I've been talking with the chaplain. Oh, I've got one of my ones with lavender. It's tickling my nose. Before you decide definitely, would you like to come back to the mother house for a while? There was a veiled pleading in the dark eyes. No, Reverend Mother. No, I prefer to remain here. It was almost impossible to go on, but she had to give the reason, the final truth as she saw it. The mother house is, for me, such a citadel of perfection as to be almost unreal, Reverend Mother. This is the reality of convent life. Her hand flew out in the only gesture she had made during her audience. Flew out with palm flat up to describe in one sweep the pine desk furnished with a flannel pen wiper such as nuns made from colored scraps, the stiff plain chair with a tasseled pillow on the seat to suggest the tapestried thrones of the mother house, the bare walls with the calendar of a local merchant hanging from one of them. It is here where the reality is, Reverend Mother, she said huskily. This is where I must fight it out. The Reverend Mother gazed at her with an expression she would have turned her eyes away from had she been able. Then I can give you only one advice, she said. Pray, sister, and try to follow our holy rule step by step. Make one more effort for God, and for me as his instrument. When I go from here, I shall take you with me in my heart and keep you each day in my prayers. She traced the sign of the cross on Sister Luke's forehead with a thumb firm as a sculptor's, flattened at the tip to make a clean and lasting mark. The film of tears in the Superior General's eyes magnified their pitch-black pupils and made them seem like 2 jet mirrors, in which Sister Luke saw two very tiny nuns reflected whitely. The talk with Reverend Mother Emmanuel haunted Sister Luke. Torn with desire to make one more effort, she nevertheless had the strange feeling that she had said farewell in that interview, and that the all-wise, loving woman who had listened to her knew this also. The two tiny nuns Sister Luke had seen reflected in her Mother General's eyes were an accurate mirroring of her divided inner state. One part of her returned the community, followed the rule with scrupulous attention, obeyed the bells instantly, cared for the patients during the grand silence like a guardian angel endowed with every grace save that of speech. And the other part counted the bridges already burned behind her and waited for the last straw to fall on her burdened conscience, watching for it fearfully lest it fall too soon and cut short the decent waiting period she longed to render to her Mother General, whom she knew was praying and hoping for a miracle. She added hypocrisy to hypocrisy day after day, and told herself that that inevitable last straw would be one of these. Oh, no. Any one of them, she thought. They're all alike in their deceptive substance. But the last straw turned out to be food. From the start of the German occupation, every patient had to bring his food ration tickets when admitted to the hospital. Frequently, toward the end of the month, a patient came in saying that he had spent all his food stamps. Until the issue for the next month was made, the nuns finagled and made combinations and fed him from the tickets of patients dying, or from those on diets who had sugar and fat coupons in surplus. Sister Luke looked with admiration on the procuratrice, who could do with an array of sugar, fat, and meat coupons for a hospitalized population of 300 what only a female with the conscience of a nun could have achieved. The procuratrice was always robbing Peter to pay Paul without ever having Peter feel anything except specialized care for his diet. Occasionally the calculations failed. Then the needed extras came from the nuns' food stamp books. Mother Didyma began to welcome German private patients sent to her through the local commandantur, since it meant that with a German of rank bedded down in her hospital, very often a whole pig or the carcass of a lamb was delivered to her office without benefit of ration stamps, a windfall for her hungry nuns. The Germans were assigned most often to the tuberculosis wing, which had more private rooms than the other floors. Sister Luke tried not to see herself and all her labors for God translated in terms of food, though she was perfectly aware that her superior welcomed Germans for the sake of her overworked and underfed nuns. The meat the conquerors provided stuck in her throat. As often as she had the strength to do so, she passed the meat dish to the nun sitting next to her in the refectory without partaking of it, and filled up her plate with the customary rutabaga, carrots, and potatoes instead. The final straw was added when she had to receive the mistress of the highest-ranking German who had ever visited her floor. He was a lean, fair officer with grey eyes that fixed her like polished bayonets when he told her, in daring worldly terms as though her presence placarded her understanding of them, that he was leaving the treasure of his life in her hands. The treasure was a Frenchwoman, daughter of a wealthy merchant who received special concessions from the German occupation in France in return for the petty information the girl supplied to a Gestapo lover. From the moment Mademoiselle Jean, oh no, how do you pronounce it? Jean, was received as a patient, lamb and pork from Belgian farms, smoked salmon from Norway, butter and chocolate from Denmark, and cheese from Holland began appearing on patients' trays and on the refectory table. For the first time in years, Mother Didyma looked relaxed. The price of the unrationed windfall was service to a spoiled darling of the French upper crust who was a traitor to her country. By comparison, the German lover was less odious to Sister Luke, upon whose back fell the intimate nursing task. After the first night, the Frenchwoman demanded of the superior that a nun sleep in the room with her. Sister Luke was appointed. "This is such an obscure case," said Mother Didyma. Sister Luke bowed obediently and moved a cot and screen into the room of the perfectly healthy Frenchwoman, whose lover, she was certain, had placed her in the convent hospital for safekeeping while his business occupied him, simply because he could not trust her. Mademoiselle Jeanne's face had the limpid beauty of a Fragonard, but behind her indolent violet eyes lurked the gleaming practicality of the accomplished demi-mondaine. Petulant, spoiled, and very bored, Mademoiselle Jeanne, darn it, Jeanne, sorry, spent her days thinking up special services to add to the burden of the nuns, whom she obviously despised, and her nights trying to make Sister Luke talk. "Are the sisters afraid of the Germans?" she would ask. "This is not important for your soul or your body, mademoiselle. I am in the grand silence. Call me if you really need me." "Then you don't reply to my question because you don't wish to admit that they are." And Sister Luke would lie awake trembling with fury for the slur against her sisters, even wishing for an air raid so she might have excuse to bundle her so-called patients into the cellars to have a look at absolute fearlessness in action. Mademoiselle Jeanne thought of everything to torment her. Her morning gruel had to be strained to the consistency of velvet smooth cream. If not, she sent it back down 3 flights of stairs to the kitchen. Why is my... Don't mess with me, little phone. She complained that the suppositories were too large, and each morning when her lover called, she moaned her complaints over the telephone. One morning, Sister Luke had had enough. She snatched the receiver from her patient and said in German, "And since when, mein Herr, has our occupied country been manufacturing anal suppositories custom-made to fit the patient?" She heard him laugh then, great peals of merriment that made the earpiece vibrate. A side of beef was delivered to the convent that same afternoon, ticketed with her name. She went straight to the chaplain's office. "I am a food stamp, Father," she said. "Have you written that letter to the cardinal?" Seeing from his expression he had not, she went on. "Because if you have not, and have no intention of doing so, you must forgive me, Father, but I shall leave without permission. I have come to a place." She was too exhausted to even try to tell him of the other troubles she had laid at the foot of the altar that morning at Mass. Tense and red-eyed from a sleepless night, she had first planned her day's work, the assignment of each nurse and student, the menus for special patients, and the request she must make for 10 ounces of cognac for one of her dying patients whose tongue was dry and black. And she had fought before the altar her coming struggle with the pantry nun, who was going to say as always, "But I must have a requisition for the cognac, sister." "You'll get no requisition." Why should that poor man pay when he hasn't had a tray of food in 8 days, and all his tickets used meanwhile for others? Where in the name of God is charity that we cannot afford to put a few drops of cognac and water on the tongue of a dying man? Then she heard herself fighting in front of the tabernacle. Once again that morning in the Mass... My screen keeps darkening. Don't like that. As so often as of late, she denied herself communion, the only food that counted. As the sisters knelt at the rail, she had buried her face in her hands and tasted the bitter salt of her tears. "I have come to a place," she repeated to the chaplain. "Are you sure, sister, that this won't be a scandal for the young nurses who followed you into the convent? There have been quite a few, as I recall." He delivered his last shot wistfully. "If any of my students entered the convent out of admiration for a nun, instead of for the love of God and of Him alone, then I should be the first to tell them to leave at once. Father, I beg you to write that letter." "Very well, sister. I see your mind is made up. We as priests can only listen, pray, and advise." He gave her a rueful smile, touched with a bewilderment she understood. "But there is always an enigma, is there not? In the end, the final resolution lies between the soul and the blessed Lord. I'll write tonight, sister. I shall tell the Archbishop that I, as your confessor, see no cause why your petition should not be granted." Afterwards, it seemed as if Providence had had a hand in her timing. The chaplain's letter to Malines was dated Trinity Sunday, June 4th, 1944, the day that Rome was liberated by the Anglo-American forces, while nearer home, just across the Channel, huge Allied fleets and armies waited in England for the D-Day command of General Eisenhower to start forward for the liberation of France. the kind of world into which a non-emergent could fit swiftly and without embarrassing detection was being prepared. Come on. In the storm so soon to be unleashed, all swirling shapes would look alike. But at the time, inside Belgium, where the quiet of a dead-end street prevailed, nothing of this could be guessed. The German officer came to remove his mistress a week later. Sister Luke heard him speaking English with one of her British sisters on the way up to her ward. A flawless diction, the sister said afterward. Had I been blindfolded, I'd have said Oxford. He brought his mistress a coat of Russian sable and a box of candied violets from Paris. One has to wheedle her to get her to accept an invitation to the Bavarian Alps, he said to Sister Luke, as he dropped the beautiful coat over the Frenchwoman's shoulders. This fits, chérie, made to measure. He started laughing again as he had laughed over the telephone. He did not glance at Sister Luke until he picked up the Frenchwoman's bags. Her eyes widened at the sight of a German officer carrying luggage like a porter, instead of summoning her to the task. Perhaps I'll be seeing you again, sister, he said. He thrust a roll of currency into her hands as he went out. She counted it before turning it over to her superior, just to see how much, besides lamb and beef carcasses, her forbearance had earned in the eyes of the conqueror. Between two bills she found a small note. If you ever come out, go at once to, and there was a Brussels address. All that day she tried to put two and two together. Only clairvoyance could explain how the German officer knew of her conversations with the chaplain. Not even the underground had guessed her intention. The underground, she thought. And then she remembered Lisa. On the evening of her final plea to the chaplain, she had gone to the students' dormitory. This is still on, right? For a talk with Lisa, fearful that the girl might be one of those who, out of admiration, would follow her into the convent. She knew that in Lisa's eyes she seemed a cornerstone of monastic security, and that her student had talked of taking the veil after her nursing courses were completed. It had cost her nearly all the courage that remained to her to stand before her student and say, "I'm going out, Lisa," as it had cost her her last ounce of control not to embrace her student when Lisa had assured her that it was not through admiring emulation of her sister that she wished to give her life to God. "I've watched so many men die, sister," she had said. "The fear when men die without faith is one of the big reasons, I think. Right now it seems to me that only in the cloister is there any faith left on earth. It's God's underground, in a sense. The call to it seems as urgent as the telephone calls that summon me to pick up food stamps, sister, never knowing who is speaking or who delivers the life-giving stamps." So then, she thought, Lisa must have been the conveyor of her secret to the German officer. To the German, she told herself steadily, who was not a German, but an Englishman disguised as one for reasons of espionage and connected somehow with our underground. That was why he had picked up the Frenchwoman's bags instead of ordering a nun to do it. That was why he had laughed instead of ordering her arrested when she had angrily intruded on his telephone call to his mistress. As she had prayed that her confession to Lisa would not disturb the girl's intention to enter the convent, and had that prayer granted with wondrous fullness, so now she prayed for the safety of the grey-eyed Englishman on his way into Hitler's heartland, using a mistress irreproachably treasonable to her country as a stylish screen for his own counter-espionage. She kept his note beneath her scapular. "I have this," she thought, "and my hair enough since that dispensation when I chose to let mine grow." She could feel the heat of her new short hair beneath the cap and coif. Sometimes in the shower she ran her fingers through it and tried to imagine what it would look like in a mirror. Were there any grey streaks yet? When you were past 35, with 6 of those years passed in the Congo, where every year aged you twofold, you couldn't be sure. And that's the end of chapter 18. One more. Anyone have ideas of anything special I can do next week? I just don't know. I'll smoke one last one for you. We are getting up to an hour now today. That was a long one, I guess. Jingly kitties around. Almost dinner time. Gonna go back and work on my headshots again. Oh, which kitty? Hey kitty, what are you doing? Hi. It's kitty heaven. They've got so much to play around. One keeps bringing in these giant grubs. I don't know if they're dead already or he kills them, but I've started punishing him. He gets grounded now if he brings one in. Because you can't do that. I can't keep killing things and bring him in. It's not good. Hello, you. Oh, up the tree. Oh, good job. Yeah. Up the other tree. He's funny. He is running around. What's new? My new videos last week with the Sabrina dress. You should go watch that. Oh, here comes his buddy. He went that way. He went that way. And up that tree. He went over that way. So the Sabrina video is up finally. I feel like I could have done a better job, but it's okay. Someday maybe I can update it with definite info. What'd you find? What else? What else is new? Headshots. I have new headshots soon. Acting class. What other video should I do? I will do another video, one other smoking video after this. I'm not sure if I'll do it next week or the week after, like after we're done with this series. I want to do kind of a checking up on my smoking. Maybe I'll do like a comparison, like the first time and this time. Well, I only had one so far, and it's okay. I have to cut out earlier though, or when it's supposed to end. They kind of run over, and at midnight I just can't. I feel awful. Sitting there for 4 hours, I definitely have to cut out at 11:30, because yeah. I also had kind of a cold in class last week, so I wasn't feeling good. So this next week I'm preparing a monologue from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. So I need to memorize that. Got some of it memorized, but you know. Gonna do that. I have to start stockpiling some scenes and monologues. Thanks, it's my cozy wool that I bought and turned into a throw. He's cold. Yeah, we'll see how the acting class is going. So I'll have my second class next week. What else? I don't know. Not a lot. Days go by so quickly. At the end of the day, I think, what on earth did I do today? You know, and I look back and I feel like I only got 1 or 2 things done. I don't know how this happens. Today, let's see, was the headshots and this. Yesterday I hennaed my hair, like dark henna. I'm experimenting with henna because for the grays, because once you're over 35, and you know, hair dye is not very good for you or the environment, so I don't want to be dyeing my hair more than necessary. So trying henna, seeing how that works. Yeah, the days just go by so fast, and then I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, I did figure out the next diary I'm going to read. So I have like 2 videos left for the diary I'm reading over on my Buy Me a Coffee. Don't forget, I have a buymeacoffee.com/KendallBrenneman. The lostdiaryproject.com also redirects there because it's for my diary readings. But I'm finishing up one diary and doing research and preparing to read the next one. And this week, I finally figured out the girl's name. I finally figured out whose diary it is. So, this is fun. So far, it's four diaries that I've figured out. Well, the one had his name on it, so that's pretty easy. But the other 3 did not have... Okay, no, wait. One of them had a calling card with the girl's name, so I assume that was her. One more chapter next week. Next week. So I figured that out. So now, the goal is to find living relatives of these people, which somehow is more difficult. I even joined up on Ancestry.com, which, by the way, is really confusing to me because you would think there's just like one giant family tree, and people add to it. I think that's how family search works. But boy, like everyone's allowed to like make their own family tree, and you can't like add to a family tree. You have to like make your own. And so I'll find that like the person I'm looking for on like two different family trees, but like one will say the person has a child and one doesn't list anything, and it's frustrating. I've contacted customer support for help. But it's exciting. I figured that one out. And I started reading another diary that will come after this, because I've got almost all of this woman's diaries. It was a big investment. And the first diary is in 1868. So I'm trying to read that, and finding her handwriting very difficult. So I'm typing it out as I write, or as I read, and hoping I'll go back and figure it out once I can understand her handwriting better. But oh my goodness. Oh, and she knows it's bad. Well, it's not bad, it's just tiny. And but her first entry was like, and today I begin my hieroglyphs for 1868. And they are hieroglyphs. It took me until, till January 5th. I'm reading very slowly because I have to figure these out, to sort out this one word that she kept writing. I noticed a lot was the, just the. I couldn't read the. But anyway, the diary thing is fun. So if you like hearing me read, not in Audrey's voice, I am doing videos of these diaries over on buymeacoffee.com. And I will continue doing those for a long time, because I have a lot of them. What was I going to say about the diaries? Boy, what? They are going to have a podcast option there too at some point, so I'm thinking of making them into podcasts too. And I'm considering, for the nun story, I don't know. I need to look into this. But maybe like reading it as an audiobook, Would you be interested in that? Like just me reading it, totally as Audrey, as an audiobook? Because I need to look into it. But as far as I know, like no one really knows who has the copyright, which is why no new books have been published. So if I'd be safe to do that, maybe. I've been looking into trying to record some see how good my recording equipment is, and join a website where you can read audiobooks, All right, that's one vote for an audiobook. Yeah, it depends on my audio equipment, but there is a website where you can, try to get work reading audiobooks. And I thought I could put my voice on there, and I could put my voice on there as Audrey, and, who knows. Accents are fun. I would do English too, but they could get a real English person, and I'd probably mess that up. I would need a coach. Why does this keep going dark? That's so dumb. So, okay, it's a long one today. I didn't get as cold as I thought I would get out here. I guess I prepared efficiently. There is a new book on Audrey out. I haven't bought it yet. It's more expensive here than it is in the US, and even more expensive for me because I earn in dollars and not euros. So it's Audrey Hepburn Warrior by Robert Mattson. If you're interested in that, it's about her later years, and I can't wait to read it. I do have other books on my reading list, so I'm trying to get through those first, and then maybe by the time I'm done with those, 2 votes for audiobook. all right, I'll look into it. But I can't wait to read that book. So I have to get through 2 or 3 other books that I have on my reading list. And then maybe by then the price will go down and I'll get that one and read that. And maybe at some point I'll do some videos reading some other things as Audrey. They'll probably be videos and not live streams. And I don't think they'll have smoking. Those will be separate videos. I don't know, lots to do. I have lots of Audrey ideas. Have I been using OCR? No, I don't really know what that is. OCR, I'll have to look that up. Anyway, I've got all these ideas. Well, some ideas are not Audrey ideas, but I have a bunch of Audrey ideas. But then I think yes, my goal is to be the best Audrey I can be and get that role. But at the same time, it's a weird thought to have, most of my videos on the channel be Audrey stuff. So I'm trying to avoid that. So I'll try to balance that out. After they've cast this movie, well, you'll either see a lot of Audrey stuff because I'll be Audrey, or I will not be doing so much because that's the whole goal. And then I'll just be doing Kendall things. But yeah, okay. I can't think of anything really urgent other than those things. Check out my Buy Me a Coffee. Think about the audiobook. I will look into that as well. OCR, I will look that up. Yeah. I guess that's about it for now. So it's about time to go inside, see what's going on for dinner, feed the cats, do a little reading. Oh, and finish editing my headshots. Gotta get those done. Optical character. Oh, so would you scan the pages or something? I don't know if it would recognize these characters. I don't have the book to show you, but boy. Would it be able to do that? Like recognize handwriting? Is that what it does? That would be nice. I was trying to remember something. I'll wait for your response for a minute, or a moment, not a minute, but that would be interesting if it could read this handwriting. It's difficult, it's cursive, and it's, 150 years old. I hope her handwriting gets better. I think usually handwriting gets worse, but I haven't looked at the other ones yet. They're at my cousin's house, so I have to wait to get them. So many diaries. It's a fun hobby. Can't wait to read the other ones. I have to decide what's going to happen with my diaries when I'm gone. There are pretty dumb things written in them as a teenager, Even as an adult, there's dumb stuff in there. It's just, yep. And bad handwriting. All right, so I guess I will head out now. Let me know if you have ideas for next week, because it'll be the last chapter of the nun story. Try to think if there's any interesting things I could do, or surprise news. Maybe something will come up this week. Yeah, but wow. 18 weeks with no rain on my Saturdays or Sundays or Mondays or whatever day. We've done well. Yeah, I'll look into that. Anything that can help me read these things would be helpful. Stream crashed. Oh, oops. Oh well. Well, no problem. I'll try to remember to check the comments after this. I don't always remember. So I will see you next week. Should be the same time. I don't have anything planned. So yeah. Unless it rains. Wouldn't that be funny? The last week it'll rain. No, let's not say that. It'll be fine. We'll make it all the way through the book. It'll be great. Okay. I will see you later. Bye.